class, and welcome to week 4 of Human Nutrition. So, last week we looked at body systems and we spent most of our time looking at the digestive system. And I hope that you were able to see that the importance of the digestive system, that without it, we can take in the most nutritious foods in the world and we're not going to be able to break them down and utilize them so that we will be able to then get them to the places that they need to be to do the functions that they need to do in our body. So, this week was just kind of a good overview of the digestive system, and I hope that by doing your assignment that you were able to see just how it all kind of fits together, both the accessory organs and the digestive tract. We're going to be looking at the digestive system and digestion of nutrients all throughout the semester. So at each nutrient, we'll kind of revisit how it gets digested and absorbed and utilized. So, speaking of nutrients, we are going to jump right into macronutrients this week, and we're going to look at our first macronutrient, which is carbohydrates. And love them or hate them, we're going to see that metabolically and physiologically, we're going to see that carbohydrates are going to be an important part of our diet, and that our body really needs to use them for a lot of important functions, energy being one of them, of course. So, our challenge with carbohydrates, of course, is the fact that we aren't going to always make the best choices and that not all carbs are going to be created equal. And I think that's where we found that carbohydrates in general have kind of gotten a bad reputation because as Americans, we're not always making those good choices. We tend to eat carbohydrates that are very processed and refined and are not the whole grains or fruits and vegetable sources of carbohydrates that we know are going to provide us with a whole lot more nutritional value. And then, of course, there's sugar. We as Americans tend to consume way too much sugar in that processed, refined, added form. So that's really where we get into trouble with carbs. And we need to make that distinction that it's not all carbs that are bad. And I really hate to use that word bad, but there are certain carbs that are certainly healthier for us than others. So for our discussions this week, you are going to be looking at sugar in a little bit more detail. And your two choices, the first one is going to be looking at high fructose corn syrup. And certainly high fructose corn syrup is something that is on the naughty list at the moment. But we're going to take a look at the science behind that because there's a lot of misinformation that is currently out there about high fructose corn syrup. So we're going to take a look at some of those myths and misconceptions, as well as the true science behind how it affects our health. And then we're going to just take a look at sugar in general for the second option in discussions this week. And so we're going to answer questions like, is sugar really addictive? And, how bad for us is that sugar? Is it causing us obesity? So lots of answers that we're going to be looking for with all sorts of questions about sugar. So it will be interesting this week to kind of examine some of, again, those myths, misconceptions, and truths that we have about those sugars that we consume so many of. For your assignment, you get to look at a case study. So we're going to look at Simone and Simone's diet, and we're going to be focusing in primarily on carbohydrates. We might notice some other things that are needing some work in her diet, but we're going to look primarily at carbohydrates. So in addition to just kind of giving some general overviews and looking at her carbohydrate intake, we're going to get a little bit more specific. And we're going to be looking at things like percent of calories because a lot of our recommendations for nutrients, carbohydrates being the one that we'll look at first, are based off of out of all the calories we take in, how much should come from carbohydrates. So if we think back to chapter 1, we learned that our different nutrients have different caloric values. So if you recall, carbohydrates, and that's all carbohydrates, whether it's a complex carbohydrate or whether it's sugar, is going to give us 4 calories per gram. So in order to create our calorie level, or to figure out our calorie level, I should say, we're going to take any number of grams that we have of carbohydrates, multiply that by 4, and that will convert that into calories. We divide that piece, that number of calories that came from carbohydrates, by the total calories that we consume, and that gives us a percentage. So we're going to be doing that for Simone and her diet for both total carbs and also for sugar. We're going to say that perhaps Simone does not eat the best diet. So then you're going to have the opportunity to give her some suggestions for ways that she can improve, especially when it comes to carbohydrates. And potentially she's eating a little bit more sugar than she should as well. So this week is going to be an interesting week because I think there again is so much controversy surrounding carbohydrates now, and we actually have kind of seen that come and go throughout history of our dietary recommendations and our diet recommendations. So it will be interesting to see what we come up with for our discussions. So I'm going to wish you a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing what types of sweet things we come up with for discussion.